Hi everyone, welcome to PopCultX episode 159. We're back at it this week talking about all things pop culture with your co-hosts Gabriel and Danny. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. Danny, what's going on?
Oh, not too much, not too much. It's October still. We're talking about all things that go bump in the night, I guess. I will say I know when we're
Yeah,
recording this, the historic storm over in Florida is about to hit landfall, Milton. So just thinking about all those people I
yeah,
know who live out that way, stay safe out there. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen like the satellite pictures of it.
yeah. I have. It's pretty sad. I definitely my heart goes out to all the people that are being impacted by the hurricane. Um, One of the things that I find interesting is that there are some people that actually think that the government is causing the hurricanes. And that's something that's really scary to me that there are people that
Yeah.
actually believe that the government can
hmm
control the weather. Have you
Yeah,
heard that conspiracy?
I have, and I saw a meme today on Twitter. It was like instead of Joe Biden, it was Joe Poseidon or something like that.
Yeah.
And it made me laugh. I was like, come on, really?
Yeah, I mean we're talking about scary things, right? Because it's October, and the fact that there are people that actually think that the weather is controlled by the government is really scary to me.
Yeah,
Like that there are people that are that foolish
yeah,
that walk amongst us. So, but that being said, I do feel bad for the people that are impacted by the hurricane. Hopefully, everyone is stays safe and all of that. So
yeah, absolutely. And you're right. Those
that's
people
where my
who,
focus will be.
yeah, I agree with you. I agree. And yeah, okay, no more about that because that's gonna make me mad when I start thinking about that.
And we came together with a particular topic in mind, that being all things vampire movies, music inspired by vampires, comic books that are about vampires, books about vampires. One of the things that I really love about all things scary is vampires. Vampires are one of my favorites. So that's what we're here to discuss. So we can move from that previous topic onto the topic of this week, which is vampire movies.
Yes, let's move on to those bloodsuckers, I guess, right? Um, one question I had right off the top, you said music inspired by
Yeah.
vampires. That perked me up. What do you mean? Because I don't think I've ever thought
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
music being inspired by vampires. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I can think of a couple songs that are inspired by songs by vampire, like music that is inspired by vampires. I think Annie Lennox has a song that is featured on the Bram Stoker's Dracula soundtrack. I
Okay.
also think about Concrete Blonde had songs about vampires. Um, I think that as like a subculture, there are people that like are really into vampires, and then that inspires their art, including their music. So I think that there's a lot of music that is inspired by vampires, by that vampiric culture, I think. And so I think it's really interesting. I'm a big fan of Concrete Blonde. They're kind of a band from like the 80s and 90s that I used to listen to. Annie Lennox. One of my favorite soundtracks of any horror movie is Bram Stoker's Dracula. The soundtrack to that is amazing. It's such
Yeah.
a good soundtrack.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the score of it as well, right? So there's not the soundtrack, but the whole
Yeah,
score. Yeah.
right.
Um, That's interesting. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Annie Lennox, so I can definitely see her doing music inspired by vampires, or the vampiric culture, as you put it, which I like the
Yeah.
way you. That's a good phrase, the vampiric culture of all things.
I don't know if that's proper English, but let's go with it.
It works, and I like it. So if it isn't, it is now. At least in my lexicon, I guess.
One of my favorite songs by Concrete Blonde is Bloodletting, the vampire song. So if you haven't heard of have you heard of Concrete Blonde first of all?
It sounds familiar. I don't think I've ever specifically sought out or heard their music, but it sounds familiar.
Yeah, they're probably most known for a their two hits are Joey and the other song is I can't think of it off the top of my head. But they have another song that was a cover of a Leonard Cohen song.
Oh,
That's what they're probably most known for. But definitely check them out. They're very cool. They're like a really interesting band. Like I said, from like the 80s. That is pretty cool. I used to listen to them all the time.
cool. Yeah, I'll check them out. That sounds pretty cool. Bram Stoker's Dracula, of course, was the Dracula book written by Bram Stoker, which I think was probably, would you say is like the basis for like most modern films when we think about the vampires or Dracula trope, I guess.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's like the
when,
blue.
yeah, the blueprint, exactly. So when Francis Ford Coppola created his masterpiece and it was so well done, it was so well acted, so many fantastic performances in it. I remember watching it probably when it first came out, and I didn't really get into the vibe of it all, I guess, because it takes a certain mindset, I think, to enjoy it. And I wasn't there at that time. But recently, yes, it is a masterpiece. And I think it's one that endures quite well.
Yeah, I immediately was attracted to it. I love everything about that movie. We already talked about the music. The costumes in the film are
Hmm.
so good.
Hmm.
They're amazing. I don't remember or recall the name of the costumer who did those particular costumes. Let me Google it real quick. But she's amazing. I think she's Japanese, um, or was. She's passed. Let me just, I'm Googling it real quick. Uh, and like you said, the actors were amazing in it. Let's see.
It's a shame while you're looking it up that Gary Oldman hasn't won an Oscar. Just throwing that out there.
He hasn't? Wow.
Yeah.
So her name is Aiko Ishioka, who is
Mm-hmm.
known for she is Japanese and very avant-garde. The costumes are amazing. Like I could just look at the costuming all day. Like they're so amazing and beautiful. Um, and just the vibe of the movie, like the gothic vibe of the movie is amazing. Like the three bride. I already mentioned this on a previous podcast how much I was into like the three brides of Dracula. They were incredible,
Mm-hmm.
incredibly sexy. I don't know if you recall those three
Yeah, I remember that.
actresses, and then you Lucy, the victim of Dracula, who because gets turned into a vampire, and she comes out in like her like funeral attire as like a vampire, and she's like pale white with this like really cool ornate costume on. You have like Gary Oldman coming out as like a werewolf vampire, like a wolf at one point, and then being a vampire at another. It just super cool. Like the visual is just really amazing. Everything about it I loved. Winona Ryder, Keanu Reeves. Um, what's the guy that plays Van Helsing? The guy from Silence of the Lambs.
Anthony Hopkins.
Anthony Hopkins is in it. He's amazing. Every like literally everything about it I love. Such a good movie. It's a classic.
Absolutely. And before we get fact checked by anyone out there, I did look. Gary Oldman, I think, did win an Oscar for The Darkest Hour, where I think he played Winston Churchill. So
Oh, okay.
I
Yeah.
stand
I
corrected.
was like would be really surprised by that because he's such a great actor.
He is.
But you know how that happens sometimes, the Academy overlooks like the best actors and then they give them an award when they're like 90.
That's true. But yeah, he is such a fantastic actor. All his work is just phenomenal. Um, but you mentioned Van Helsing, and I only bring that up again because that is one of my favorite, although it's not a typical vampire movie. It does have vampires. Dracula, of course, is in it,
Yeah.
and his three brides as well, right? Of course, with Hugh Jackman as Van Helsing, and it's
Yeah.
one of those movies that I could, when it's on, I'll just have it on and watch it. Just it's one that's a feel good type movie for me. I just enjoy it so much, and it's just I don't know. It's just something about the whole film. It's just fun, I guess.
Yeah, I think that vampires are just lend itself to be very entertaining. It has like horror. Typically, there's like a comedic element to it. They're very sensual and like kind of sexy.
Hmm.
And so it sort of offers something for everyone, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're not into vampires, like I don't know what's wrong with you because they're the coolest monsters out, which is kind of interesting, which is like a point that I wanted to make is that like I've never really been scared of vampires. Like, do you find them like have you ever been watching a horror movie that's a vampire themed movie and been scared by a vampire? Like I would always be like rushing to the vampire and be like, please make me a vampire too. Like I would not be scared of them at all.
No, I don't. I don't think I've ever been scared of them. I mean, yeah, I don't think so, and especially in a film sense, because films don't scare me. But I think just if I were to see one, I don't think I'd rush to it and be like, "Hey, turn me too." I mean, I guess I could kind of see that. I mean, like, I would want to be immortal in a way, but then again, maybe not.
Oh, I would immediately. I would sign up in like a second, like before you could even ask me. I would be like, please turn me into a vampire.
Now, there are instances where vampires, what's that movie? I think it's called Daybreakers with Ethan Hawke, right? Where the guy becomes a vampire, but their food source is running out. You know, that's a topic or thing that I've thought about recently. Is like, what happens in a world of vampires where humans are no longer around, right? And in that film, that's basically what they touch on. And that's one of those films that I think gets overlooked as a vampiric movie, and I really enjoyed that one.
That's an interesting question of like, what would you do out of food? But I guess you would have to like farm humans, right? You would have to like have them sort of like we do cows, except for humans.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, but I guess it all comes down to, is human blood the only blood that can sustain a vampire, right? In most instances, yes. But of course, there are more modern adaptations where it's not the case, where there are either substitutes, animals are fine. I wouldn't call them vegan in vampires like in the Twilight films, but they don't actively hunt out humans as their prey. um, but I think that kind of, for me, detracts from the whole lore of the vampire when they are able to sustain themselves on um non-human blood, because I think it takes away from the fear of it all, from the perceived bump in the night, the looking. I think it's think of the movie, was it Interview with the Vampire, right? Where Brad Pitt's character is eating the rats, right? And Tom Cruise
Mm.
is living the high life, and Brad Pitt's just kind of like eagerly making it through because he can't bring himself to feast upon human blood. And so, do you think that's something that modern filmmakers should adjust to, just taking it back to humans, or can vampires, live on animals, just blood, no matter where it's from?
I think they should stick to humans. That's what makes them scary, right? Is
Right.
that they're hunting for blood and that they have this thirst for blood that's like insatiable. That's part of their whole, like that's what makes a vampire. You mentioned that Twilight, that they don't drink blood from humans. Like I've never seen Twilight, so I can't speak to that, but like is that really a thing? They don't drink human blood?
Like the whole, was it Edward Cullen? Think, yeah. His whole family, or their little group, whatever you want to call them, of vampires, they refuse to drink the human blood, so they hunt animals, yeah, in the forest.
Okay, so that's like the stupidest thing I've heard of. Like that takes away the coolness of a vampire. I couldn't watch that movie. Like I couldn't get myself to watch it just because it looks so horrible. But so you're not really even a vampire. You're if you're hunting animals, you're basically just a human, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, you're drinking their blood, but you're just human. Yeah, you might not have a heartbeat or need to sleep, but you're just hunting animals. So yeah, that's true.
Like what, why are you cool? That's horrible. Like that makes me never ever want to see that movie or those movies for multiple reasons. But yeah, that's what makes them cool. Like that they, they hunt humans and they have and that's what has that dynamic of like them looking for a victim and like the victim being sort of semi-willing to be a victim
Mm.
and them like luring them into being their prey. Um and that whole dynamic I think is what is cool of vampire movies. That's what makes interesting.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think to like newer movies, like I watched one recently with Jamie Foxx called Day Shift. I think we talked about this when it came out a few years ago. And it was such a fun
Yeah.
movie because the vampires were vampires. They they
Mhm.
sought out human blood, they attacked, they played into what we expect a vampire would be. And I think the fact that, they made fun of the different newer vampire tropes within that movie was well done, and I enjoyed that movie. Um,
So we talked about Stoker's Dracula being like a classic of the vampire movies. You mentioned Interview with the Vampire. What other vampire movies would you consider like classic?
well, I think Nosferatu, of course, the it's going to be like the OG, right? It's like the original vampire movie, if
Yeah,
I think correctly. I think more cult classics would be like Lost Boys. That's probably my favorite is Lost Boys.
yeah.
Um, Fright Night is also a great one, I think. I saw the original
Mhm.
way back when, just watched the remake, the 2011 remake with Colin Farrell recently, and I really
Mhm.
liked it even more. It was so cool. It was so fun to watch. The more humorous, not humorous, but he knows he's better and he could take everyone down, right? Because he's a vampire. So he has that little smirk about him, that little arrogance that vampires should have because they're more than just, well, they're not human, but they're at the top of the food chain, I guess. So those movies like that are
Yeah.
classics to me. What about you?
I would have to say From Dusk Till Dawn is one of my
Mm,
favorites.
hmm.
It's
Absolutely.
super funny.
Yeah.
It's got like Selma Hayek in it, George Clooney, written by Quentin Tarantino, directed by Robert Rodriguez. It's just a really fun movie. Juliette Lewis is in it, which is like one of my favorite actresses. Um, what other ones? Lost Boys is definitely one of my favorites. Um, Fright Night, 30 Days of Night is another one
Ooh,
that's
that's
pretty
a good one.
fun
Hmm.
to watch. It's a cool premise. Buffy the Vampire Slayer was really cool. The actual movie, not the TV show. That one was really funny. That had Paul Rubens in it, Pee Wee Herman.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot that I you really we could really go into.
What do you
But
think's
those
the
would be like some of my favorites.
what's one of the first vampire movies you think you saw as a young kid growing up?
Probably Fright Night. I think that was probably one of the first ones that I saw.
Yeah.
Um, because yeah, and then after that, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Fright Night 2 was really good too. That's like where his I think it's his sister
I haven't seen that.
comes in. Uh, oh, if you haven't seen Fright Night 2, you need to see it. It's good. It it basically swaps the gender roles. So female vampire and I want to say boy that's really good. I recommend if you haven't seen that, definitely check it out.
Okay, I'll check that out. I-
I haven't seen it on streaming, so I don't know if it's on any streaming services. But it's a really cool movie. And oh, another one that is like another classic that's like super artistic and like not mainstream, but probably like a cult classic is Vamp with Grace Jones. She plays a vampire stripper in it. Super good. That's a great
Okay.
movie. She's like her whole body is decorated by Keith Haring, and she has like this white graffiti painting on her nude body. Just very striking. She has like an orange red wig on in the
Hmm.
movie. Plays a vampire. Really cool. One of my favorites. That might be one of my first ones too. Like that had to have been early 80s.
Yeah,
And so
86.
that might have been one of the so I would have been like 9 when I saw that, which is kind of crazy that I was watching that when I was 9, but whatever.
I think one of the first ones I saw is actually stars Jim Carrey in it with Lauren Hutton. It's Once Bitten.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and that was like I think one of my first introductions to what a vampire is, and it
Yeah,
was in that instance, growing up watching that, I was like, I'd be like, you okay? I'll sign up to be a vampire. That
right.
was
If
interesting.
if the punishment is that you have to get bitten by Lauren Hutton, I think that
There
that's
you
not a
go.
bad punishment. Yeah,
Yeah, there's been so many great films, vampire films. I mean, and also it spurns out, like you said, comic books, right? We spoke to Rodney Barnes and Jason Sean Alexander before, and they of course did Philadelphia, which has vampires, and their most recent release of Blackula, or the remake of that as a graphic
yeah.
novel. And so, I mean, of course, also Dracula, was it Dracula? Yeah, had a resurgence recently in a comic book series.
Yeah, and they had also 30 Days of Night is a graphic novel that they based
Oh,
the movie on.
I didn't know
Um,
that. Interesting. Okay.
yeah, and what's really cool about that is that it has a very distinctive art style, like the way that they drew the vampires, and they stayed pretty true to that visual style of the way the vampires look. So that was really cool.
That's
And then you
cool.
have American Vampire. I think that's another series, comic book series that is out. Um, and then you have Marvel just did a vampire series with Blade. I forget what it's called.
The Blood
And
Hunt.
then you had DC versus
Yeah. The I didn't read all of Blood Hunt yet. I do want to read it. I got a couple issues of it.
Yeah,
But also, of course, there is the written word of novels. We already mentioned Interview with the Vampire, which was Anne Rice's. We mentioned Bram Stoker's book, of course, Dracula. There's been one of my favorites, the book, not so much the movie, but the book was Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter by
yeah,
Sean Graham Smith, Seth Graham Smith, something like that.
yeah.
And that was really fun. I really enjoyed that book. Um, any other novels that you could think of that maybe you could recommend, or that or your favorite vampire novels?
Yeah, there's one called The Historian that I read a few years back. Um, it's really good. It's by Elizabeth Kostova, and it's basically it takes the approach of like Dracula and the vampire, and she travels like the world, and it has a lot of history and like world history mixed with vampire legend and lore. So it's really interesting. It's a really good book. I definitely recommend that one for anyone that's into vampires, also into history, and also
That's
into
cool.
like, yeah, sort of like adventure, like world travel,
Hmm.
because she sort of has to go all over the world in order to try to like find Dracula.
That's really cool. I'm gonna have to look that up because I do like the history aspect of it. I think that's really fun. Hmm.
Yeah, it's a really good book. It's really well written. And it's sort of a bigger book. It's pretty thick. It's a little bit long, but it's really interesting and sort of captivated my imagination and my attention like immediately, and like I couldn't put it down. So it's really a really well written book.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, of course, vampires aren't just don't stay on the screen, don't stay in the books or comic books. They're out there in pop culture as well, right? Think of like Sesame Street has a vampire. A vampire has his own cereal,
Yeah.
which is actually pretty good. I like Count Chocula cereal. Um, is there any other sort of pop culture icons or memories or moments that feature vampires that you can think of?
Um, I don't know. Those are really good. I think that it's just so pervasive, vampire legend and lore. Like even like when I've been to New Orleans, there are people there that like literally call themselves vampires that
Yeah.
are vampires in a certain sense where they're not immortal, they're not, they can go out during the day, things like that, but they drink blood, they're very much have like their own culture. And so it's really interesting to go down to New Orleans and to um witness that type of culture and storytelling and reality. I mean, I don't know what you would call it, but that, that culture of real life vampires.
Yeah. Yeah, that is I don't know, it's kind of scary in a way. That seems even more scary to me than real or vampires in films and stuff is like people wanting to live that sort of life as close as they can by drinking blood and doing that sort of stuff. That to me, I don't know, gives me the icks.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that it would be kind of creepy and kind of gross, but in another way, like because I'm so into vampires, like I can see the appeal of someone, you know, I don't know. I guess I'm a weirdo. Like I could see the appeal of someone wanting to be a vampire, and you don't have a victim. You're not like going out on the street and like attacking someone and trying to drink their blood. Like you have someone that is, you're in a relationship with, and they're a willing participant in that exchange, right?
I I guess, yeah.
I kind of think of like Billy Bob Thornton and Angelina Jolie, where they exchange vials of their blood.
I don't know. That's to each his own. I'll say to each his own. It's it must be fine for some because people do it, but more power to you.
Yeah.
Oh man. Let's see. What else? Or I guess you mentioned TV shows, right? Like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and of course there's True Blood,
Mhm.
which I never actually even saw one episode about that, so I don't have no idea what it's about. Is there any other TV shows
That's
that
really
really
good.
is it? Okay.
Yeah. You also had American Horror Story touched upon vampires as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Mm-hmm.
Lady Gaga
Yeah.
was uh, played a role in that movie or that franchise. What other vampires have been on television? Interview with the Vampires on AMC or
Yeah.
HBO Max now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been brought like a new version of Interview with the Vampire. Um, what I mean, there's been a ton of them. I can't think of TV shows. I think most famous is like Buffy the Vampire Slayer will probably be the biggest one.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
And
had a ton of episodes that came out and iconic.
it's strange to me because whenever I think of like vampire and TV show, I always think like I don't want to say it should be, but I always think that it's going to be just relegated to like a Treehouse of Horrors or like the Halloween episode, right? It's so that's what like they should stick all the vampires in one like special seasonal episode of a show. But to have a whole series, like you said,
Yeah,
like Buffy and of course Interview with the Vampire is really cool and I guess it just shows how widespread the love of the vampiric culture is.
yeah. I think that it's really cool monster, if you will. Like it's a really cool um, culture. It's I definitely see the appeal to it Like it's something that like I very much am a fan of. Like I get it. I don't know if there's a lot of people that are anti-vampires or like sick of them. That's the only thing that I think that people can maybe there's an argument for is that there's like overkill when it comes to vampires. There's been like so many vampire movies, so many vampire shows that like they're kind of over it. They're kind of sit like what is new that you can do with vampires that hasn't already been done?
True. I, I don't I don't think that's a good argument for people to have that they're over it because even though yes, it's the replaying the same toy type of thing, it's still a new interpretation or someone else's interpretation of what a vampire is. Like I go back to Daybreakers, that was a new take on it because the vampires are not of food. I look at
Yeah.
historical fiction like Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Now we know he wasn't a vampire hunter because vampires are this created mythology, and I don't think Abraham Lincoln was swinging an axe, but that was the way that it was repurposed and renewed, right? And even into more modern days, like different shows, how
Yeah.
they I think, like I said, I'll go back to Day Shift because it was the most recent film that came out, I think, with about vampires, at least that I saw. And it was a new take on it. So there's like vampire hunters who clock in and out of either a day shift or a night shift, and it's taking their turns to go hunt vampires. And I think they focus more on the hunter side than the vampire, but it was still a new take on it, and I really enjoyed it. So I don't think it will ever be played out. There's always going to be someone who sees things a little bit different than us, and it's a way to spin it. And I think once you get into more of I want to see more of like the cultural. So like uh for like From Dusk to Dawn, for example, it was more of the Mexican slant from Robert Rodriguez. I want to see how that's interpreted vampire lore in like the Japanese culture or in, Brazilian, and just see how those creatures are interpreted there. I think that's one way to look at it as an expanded vampiric culture.
That would be really interesting to be able to see the way people view vampires in different cultures. If
Hmm.
if like people even if like they're interested in vampires in Africa or in China
Or
or
Norway.
if that's like a thing that they're yeah, like that is interesting because I mean, us Americans like eat it up. Like we love vampires, right? Like it's
Hmm.
super popular with American culture. So yeah, I would be really interested to see what other cultures think of vampires. I know like being Mexican American, like Mexicans obviously are really into it.
Yeah.
We love horror, we love like all things that are scary. So we're all aboard that. But um kind of changing topics, but not really because he's sort of like a vampire because he's a predator. But we haven't talked about what's going on with like Puff Daddy
Mm.
on I think on podcast. And I'm kind of curious to what your thoughts are because um yeah, definitely I mean, he's accused of being a predator. I should say that. Like there's some wild accusations that are going on about him. Um I'm sort of like no, I wouldn't say obsessed with it, but like I can't turn away when I see a new TikTok like talking about like what's going on, like facts on the case, what he's being accused of, with who he's being accused of, like what are some of the um details of the
Hmm.
investigation. I
Hmm.
think it's really interesting. It's um I don't know, like he's a really big pop culture icon, right? Like
Yeah.
as a producer, as a rapper, as a icon of hip hop. What is your take on what's going on with him?
If he's guilty, because like you said, he's been accused, and yes, there's tapes and there's like rooms full of baby oil for whatever reason, I guess. But if if he is guilty, I don't think any leniency should be applied to him. Throw the book at him like
Yeah,
you would everyone else,
yeah,
and have lock him away. That being said, to what degree? I mean, I guess the thing that's more concerning to me, not concerning, that's not the right word, because if people were there and complicit with his actions, they should also be complicit and
Yeah.
receive some of the backlash as well. But people who I guess are
Mm.
getting caught up in that storm of what him going down, and he's like, if I'm going down, I think I'm going to take everyone else with me. But let's just say, for
Yeah.
example, we happened to go to a Diddy party. We were just there, but we didn't, you know, get involved with anything that in the back room, whatever. But we were there, so now all of a sudden we're getting dragged in that because we happened to set foot in that, right, in that environment. And it's just that's the weird part to me. It's like, how do you, especially with all the misinformation that's online and that keeps getting spewed out, and like who knows what to believe anymore, what's accurate, what's just false flags, what's real. And I don't think we'll ever know the absolute truth, because there's always going to be he said, she said, and there's the truth. um but I think for those people who just happen to go to a party at Diddy's mansion, because why wouldn't you if you got invited, right? You get to
Yeah.
hobnob with all the celebrities, you get to hobnob. Is that the right term, hobnob?
Yeah.
Okay, it just sounded
It
funny.
just, yeah, I think that it sounds weird in this context. Hobnob. It sounds very, it has a different connotation to it. But go on, you were saying hobnobbing?
Yes, I was talking about hobnobbing. And why wouldn't you want to go and rub shoulders? That's maybe, well, maybe not rub shoulders might not be good either, but why wouldn't you want to be associated somehow with these big celebrities? Because who knows, it might be your big break. You talk to the right producer, you talk to the right actor, actress, and there you go. You got your foot in the door, and now you're getting more fame and creating your own brand, so to speak. So why wouldn't you want to be in the room where it happened? See, that's wrong too. Why wouldn't you want to be around that environment?
Yeah.
Um, but I think then you getting this backlash years later. It's like, well, I just went to a party and now I have to defend myself for going to that party. And I think that's the part that's really
Yeah.
not sad, because I don't feel bad for them, but it sucks. And I
Mhm.
think that's the I think comes down to is that his evilness, I guess if you'll call it, for lack of a better term, is going to bring down so many other people who maybe just wanted to go to a party.
Yeah, I think that it really illuminates the fact that when you're someone who's new to that circle, or like new to fame, you want to be near it, right? You want to
Mhm.
try to, like you said, increase your value. You want to be able to, if you're a singer, you want to be able to get a record deal. If you're an actor, you want to get that movie deal. And it's really sad to see like what those people who are new, what they're subjected to, and how they become victimized
That's
by some of these like really evil people in the industry that have who have power. And I think that's like the part of this story that is really eye-opening for some people is, there's talk of some very famous people possibly being victimized
mhm.
by the accused here. And you just you kind of can put yourself in the same situation of like, well, yeah, if you were invited to a party by a really famous producer, rapper, you'd want to go, right? Even if
Mhm.
you weren't in the industry, you would want to go. And then once you're there, someone, which is sad, is going to take advantage of their power and victimize you. And that's where, I where I was making the analogy of like vampires versus someone who's
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
literal like ghoul who's like feeding off of other people. And it's really unfortunate that the film industry, the music industry, really any place that has power, like has a power dynamic, has people that are um willing to victimize others.
yeah.
So it kind of sucks. Like,
Hmm.
but I think that it's good that it comes out, because then people know that if they're ever in that situation, like they can say no, I guess, that they don't have to be part of that in order to be successful. I mean, I don't know, because we're not in the industry, but I would assume that you can still make it without participating in that type of stuff. I would hope so because that'd be kind of creepy if you had to. And there are conspiracy theories that say like that in order to make it in Hollywood, you have to like subscribe to that sort of like debauchery. But it's going to be a really interesting time when he does go to trial. More stuff comes out. Americans love their like salacious court dramas. And I think that more, the more that we learn about what happened in these parties, it's just going to become more pop culture. People are going to eat it up. They're going to want to know what happened, who it happened to, who was involved. Was it other famous people? Were famous people being victimized? So this is like the tip of the iceberg, I think, of like what we're now learning.
Yeah.
And it's going to be for years to come. It's going to be like really impactful upon the culture. I mean, it's going to it's going to reverberate through pop
Mhm.
culture for a long time, I think.
I agree. I agree. It will there will be a shift, and I think in the especially like you said, the way we approach those things, especially for those in the industry. Maybe you sit that party out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is good. There's gonna be a lot of reverb is a good term for it. So we'll
Yeah,
see.
and there's a lot of people that are coming forward that are saying that they knew that at a certain hour you excused yourself from those parties, right? That there
Mm,
are and not just kids, that there are like other parties that happen in Hollywood or in affluent circles that at a certain point like you get out because there are things that go down that you may not want to be a part of.
hmm.
And that's really crazy. Like that,
Yeah.
I mean, talk about like a horror movie. Like I think that is something that is really scary, that you have these people that are really part of elite society that are doing some really horrific things to people and aren't being held accountable, which is like the crazy thing.
Hmm.
And that's like real life monsters, real life like horror movie stuff.
Yeah. No, it is. It is. And hopefully now they will be held accountable.
Yeah.
So we can hope so. So
Yeah.
and that would be the shift. And then accountability, which is a word that, well, I guess a lot of these affluent people don't understand, will hopefully start to learn the meaning of.
Yeah.
So we'll see. And when we were talking, I remembered a TV show, a new show. Well, I guess it's a two shows. So there's the original and the remake, and it had the emotional draining vampire, I think, and that was What We Do in the Shadows,
Oh yeah.
right? So that, of course, is a comedic take with Taiki Waititi in the original one, but I think they had the emotional draining vampire. I remember watching a couple episodes of it, and that's like kind of almost dives into what you're saying. People just suck the energy out of people. And
Yeah. That like you have like literal vampires that are
yeah,
like feeding off of other people, which is
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. So hopefully good change will come out of all that. And it's like you said, it's going to be a good talking soundboard, sound off thing for a while coming
Yeah.
soon.
Outside of that real life horror story, what else have you been watching anything or for October, the spooky season?
Well, I watched Fright Night again, watched Day Shift. I was gonna watch the new adaptation of Salem's Lot that just
Oh
appeared
yeah.
on HBO Max, but I haven't had a chance to watch that yet. Uh, there was a new non-vampiric or non-spooky show that I watched. I watched one episode last night that I thought was really good on Hulu called The English Teacher,
Okay.
and it centers around, I think its name. Oh, let me look it up. I don't want to mess it up. It was really well done. I enjoyed it, and it got me thinking. Um, because what's the best way of putting this? When we talked with a couple episodes back, we talked with Professor Latinx, and
Yeah.
we talked about his book and how I said that I wasn't the target audience for that book, and you pointed out that maybe since I wasn't, that I was the one that needed to read it the most,
Right.
and that really stuck with me a little bit in a good way because it is true that those shows that or pop culture stuff that isn't geared toward a certain target audience because they want to play stuff up for the people that enjoy it, but those people outside of that circle there should enjoy it or at least view it to have their eyes open to different worlds and different experiences and what people have gone through. And now, so the English teacher is was created by this creator named Brian Jordan Alvarez. He also stars in it. He's the first episode. He's a gay English teacher, and they live in Texas. So right there, you can imagine what he has to go through. And then he gets the first episode centers around him getting caught kissing his partner, and he gets seen by some of his students. And one of his students' mom threatens a lawsuit and investigation,
Oh
and what he
wow.
has to go through there for that. And the just if you can imagine, you're being investigated for just being yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I thought it was really well done, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of that show. I really enjoyed it, and if we can somehow get the creator on, I would love to talk to him about that show. It was really well done. I highly recommend it for anyone out there who hasn't seen it yet.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. What streaming service is it on?
It's on Hulu.
Oh, okay, I'm gonna definitely have to check it out.
Yeah, it was really good. I really enjoyed it. He has a best friend who's like almost like a right wing MAGA, but they don't talk about politics. It's an interesting dynamic, but it was really good. Yeah, check it out.
Huh. I definitely want to watch that. What I've been watching is Grotesquerie by
Mm,
Ryan Murphy.
hmm
It's really good. It's the acting is really good. Niecy Nash is in it, and uh, just really good show. It's really kind of spooky serial killer um, with religious aspects to it. So it's
mm.
right up my alley. Uh, and yeah, that's what I've been enjoying like for is the October spooky season. But yeah, I definitely want to start watching a little bit more horror movies as the days go by.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. It'd be like the 13 days of Halloween, or start
Yeah.
I guess on what the 18th and watch one horror movie per night till leads
Mhm.
up to the 31st, right on Halloween. Watch the final one. So we'll come up with a list for you guys out there of what we're gonna watch, and then you can follow along with us and watch those same films. That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah.
So we'll put together a list. Actually, if you're out there watching, you're at this point in our video with us. Thanks for sticking around so far. Drop a comment. Let us know what film you enjoy. What's your favorite either vampire film or spooky film that we should make a point of watching this year?
Yeah.
So anything else, Gabe, you have on your mind?
No, I do want to recommend something to our readers. I just bought. I haven't had a chance to read it yet because I've got a lot on my plate when it comes to reading right now. There's a couple books that I'm currently reading, but Blue Beetle. I'm pulling it up right now. I think it's called "This Is Our Land."
Or This Land Is Not Our Land, or something? Yeah, something like that. By Jacoby Salcedo does that with what's his name? Yeah,
Yeah, Julio Anta and Jacoby Salcido.
yeah,
Uh, or yeah, and it's This Land Is Our Land, a Blue Beetle story. I just got it via Amazon the other day, so it's like it's on my shelf. Like I need
nice.
to read it. But I definitely recommend it to anyone that is a fan of Blue Beetle, of superheroes, and of course, Latinx or Latino superheroes. Definitely recommend supporting those creators doing good work, and I'll let you know how good it is when I finish reading it.
Sounds good. I got to pick that up too.
Yep.
I didn't know it was out yet, so cool.
Yeah, it just came out. I think it came out last week. So I got it via Amazon, and like I said, I've got three things that I'm reading right now. So it's on my it's on the burner right now.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, cool. Thank you for that recommendation and the book. I'm gonna go see if I can get that from the library. The Historian. I really want to read that. So, everyone out there, any recommendations? Put them in the comment field. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for liking, subscribing, following. Be sure to share us if you enjoy what you hear with all your friends and family. And we will see you next episode where we talk about another spooky topic. So, looking forward to that with more brains.
Yeah.
Hint, hint, hint. See you, everyone.
Take care.